So I want to continue the talk about the UN, Shmuel here hosting this time. What really upsets me about the latest UN atrocity of condemning Israel and suggesting Israel should face war crime charges in Den Haag in the International Court is the fact that any self-defense measures by Israel is seen as war crimes by the Palestinians, who, let's face it, it's like a band of terrorists that have no human rights, no animal rights. They run their cities like the Wild West. Hebron, the mayor, was a convicted terrorist who murdered 6 Israelis and should have been in prison for the rest of his remaining days, but was released in some sort of prison exchange and offers 20 shekels for every dead dog. And the way you treat animals is really the way you treat people. And Israel is the only democracy and the only place where people give a damn a little bit about animals. And definitely there are human rights activists here, and they're not being executed. I mean, whatever Israel does, it's a very tough neighborhood. Very, very tough neighborhood. We have Iran. Israel has to watch Iran. On the one hand, surrounded by all these horrible countries. Qatar is now hosting the soccer games. God knows why. And I'm like, why? Why is Qatar actually hosting the soccer games when they have so many human rights violations? Why is the UN not condemning Iran or Russia or any of the many, many countries of the Middle East, let's say all of them, with human rights abuses, who abuse LGBT, women, minorities, animal abuse? Why is the UN not condemning the Palestinians for the horrific treatment of animals? One thing we can all share is most of the people, we love cats. Okay, maybe not all the Muslims love dogs, but we all love cats, right? We can agree about it. Not that we all love cats, but there are cat lovers in every country in the world, I think. I think in every village in Africa, there is at least one person who loves cats, right? Who loves the lions or tigers. There must be a cat lover in every country, at least one. So why can't we get all together, all of us, the cat lovers, and condemn the horrific animal abuse in all these Middle Eastern countries? Why do we have to have the UN condemn the only democracy, the only place where animals have activists, people who actually go in the villages, the Arab villages, and rescue the animals that are being abused? And what is the excuse for them being abused? Apparently what I discovered was that according to Islam, correct me if I'm wrong, dogs are unholy or satanic. And the treatment of animals in general, if I could generalize, in religious groups, most religious groups, except the exceptions of, I guess, Buddhism could be, and I guess some Christian groups, those that follow St. Francis, this patron of the animals. Most religious groups really don't like animals. Animals represent for them all the vile habits of human beings. They see animals as being inferior to human beings, as being impulsive. They don't really see the beauty. I've had conflicts in this matter with parents and teachers when I was teaching in a religious school, and I just said, look at King Solomon from the Bible. What did he say? He said, look at the animals and learn from them, learn their wisdom. And there's so many quotes in the Bible, so many phrases about the wisdom of animals, and yet, even though all the monotheistic religions follow the Bible, they somehow distort it, and they just take the kind of quotes they want and they put an emphasis on them. So if it's LGBT rights, they take quotes from the Bible and say, look, it says in the Bible, but there's also other wonderful quotes about love and respect for all living beings, and somehow they manage to edit those out, and animals especially suffer from this. And then to go and to focus energy, negative energy on one country, tiny, tiny nation that has contributed probably the most important book that is shared by all monotheistic religions in the world, the Bible, to focus that energy on this nation, while ignoring the human rights abuses in every country in the Middle East, human and animal rights abuse in the Middle East, is absolutely astonishing. I mean, how could people that love animals, that love human rights, actually ignore the way people conduct themselves in every country in the Middle East, except in Israel, where animal abuse is not acceptable? It's not being videoed and shown on social media, but quite the opposite, it's being condemned. Yes, there's animal abuse in Israel too, unfortunately. I wish there wasn't, but at least the majority of people, you can stop anybody in the street and people will frown upon it and condemn animal abuse and human rights abuse, whereas in the other countries it's just the opposite. Wherever human rights are not respected, where minorities and people that live a different and alternative lifestyles are not respected, animals are not respected, and vice versa. Where animals are abused, human rights are abused. And whatever you can say about Israel, it's a tough terrain. It's very hard to survive in this neighborhood. I mean, we're living next to Iran. Would you like to live next to Iran? Would you like to live next to a regime that executes people that are demonstrating against the regime? Would you like to live next door to people that force women to hide their hair and their faces? Would you like to live in a place where women can be murdered, and that's considered legal? Where LGBT people can be executed and disappear, and that's considered legal? And in which world is Israel supposed to be the one facing charges for war crimes when we're the ones that have a democracy, when we're the ones that try to coexist with the Arabs, either the ones living in Israel and our neighbors, and try to make peace agreements and gave up so much of our tiny crumb of land? I mean, try to find Israel on the map. Honestly, the way Israel has been demonized and viewed, and the way it's been demonized as this huge empire. You would think we were the Roman Empire, for God's sakes, and not a tiny crumb of a land. It is actually home to Jewish refugees. That's right. The people that live here are the children and grandchildren and great-great-great-grandchildren of people that had to flee their countries, whether in Europe or whether in the Middle East or whether anywhere in the world, almost every country in the world, where Jews were not allowed to live as equals. And the main point is, this is our historical homeland, recognized by so many declarations, and all of a sudden now we're not supposed to live here. We're not supposed to be able to defend ourselves. We're supposed to have a country but not able to defend it. How does that make any sense? So the UN declares Israel's right to exist. We're a nation among nations, and yet we have no right to defend ourselves, because when Israel defends itself, it's considered a war crime. But when Russia invades Ukraine, silence. When Iran executes protesters, silence. When the entire Middle East just has so many human rights violations against women, LGBT, against anyone who's a bit different, and silence. So it's really sad that 84 years after Kristallnacht, after the night between the 9th and 10th of November 1938, where Jewish businesses were destroyed, synagogues burned, and Jews executed or taken to concentration camps, and the beginning of the genocide of the Jews of Europe and everywhere else they can get their hands on, whether it's Morocco, North Africa, wherever. in Ethiopia. Um, 84 years after that horrific night that was definitely signified the beginning of the end of Jewish life in Europe, which up to Second World War more or less was possible. Between the 9th and 10th of November, Jewish businesses were destroyed, Jews thrown out of windows, even pets. Yes, even pets of Jews were being tossed out of windows, killed, euthanized, either euthanized, killed, or taken away. Jews were not allowed to keep pets. My grandfather always spoke of a German Shepherd he had who protected him when he worked in the woods, because he was in, my maternal grandfather had a woods factory. He worked in wood. So he would go into the forests, and he was in great danger because he was a religious Jew at the same time. So it was dangerous for him to be by himself in the forest. So he always had his German Shepherd with him. But he never told me what happened to the German Shepherd. All I know is that German Shepherd didn't make it to Israel, where my grandfather had to flee with his family after the Nazis took over Slovakia. So I always wondered whatever happened to that German Shepherd. He never told me. But all I know is that Jews were not even allowed to keep dogs or cats according to the Nazi laws. And we came to Israel. People escaped to Israel so they could live like human beings and no longer persecuted by almost all the nations of the world. And then the United Nations choose to condemn Israel at such an important historical date, and to ask for Israel to be convicted of war crimes when Israel is just trying to defend its people, Jews and Arabs, by the way, because in Israel, when a rocket falls from the Palestinian territories or the terrorist territories, when a rocket falls, it doesn't know whether the person is Jewish or Arab. It doesn't know the difference between an animal or a human being. It doesn't know the difference between the ethnicity of the person. They just throw rockets indiscriminately into the territory of Israel, and we're not allowed to defend ourselves. I think it's absolutely atrocious, and I just really don't understand how the United Nations can continue to waste their time with these stupid declarations, these stupid, distorted declarations, while ignoring the war crimes of Russia against Ukraine, the war crimes of Iran against its own people, the war crimes of almost every country in the Middle East against its minorities, against its LGBT, against its women, against its people, against its protesters. I don't understand how the world can be so blind to the hate that exists in the Middle East, and to be focused on Israel as the main villain in the story, when actually it's the only democracy and the only place where Jews and Arabs coexist. And yes, they do coexist. If you come to Israel, you can see that in the state of Israel, within the state of Israel, Jews and Arabs live together, go to universities together, work side by side. And whatever you think about Israel, Arabs that have Israeli citizenship can vote in free elections. And if you think, oh, why did Israel vote for the right-wing politicians? It's because the security has so deteriorated since we have this government with the Arabs in the, there was one government where the Arab parliament members were part of the Israeli parliament, the coalition, part of the government, and yet the security situation only deteriorated and became worse and worse. And it's not only for Jewish people, it's also for Arab people. There's so many killings in the so many shootings and murders and just horrific things committed by Arabs against Arabs. And the Arab parliament members seem to be more involved in creating a Palestinian state than taking care of the Arab citizens that voted for them or voted for them. And it's just really sad that the left-wing government did so little for human rights, so little for any rights of anyone in the Middle East, and just was so focused on terrorist rights and the rights of people who commit violent crimes against other people. And it's just really sad that the left wing no longer cares about human rights, but it cares about the rights of people who use violence, who murder indiscriminately people, and they seek to protect those and not find peaceful solutions for coexistence. So anyway, peace, light, and love, and I hope we have a new week that will be less violent, and I hope the new government will be a little bit more tough on security and tough on the people that indiscriminately throw rocks and rockets at citizens and just create a big chaos. And I just hope there will be more security. And I hope that instead of fearing the right-wing Jews, the United Nations will fear the Middle Eastern, how can I say it, the Arab extremists who killed indiscriminately Arabs and Jews and don't seem to be ever prosecuted properly in any sort of court, because it's the Wild West over here. Anyway, peace, light, and love for everyone.